Hey guys, and welcome to today's video, which is going to be all about setting up your team on the CT side of Mirage. As this is a basics guide and a beginner's video and all of that, this is for people new to playing in team environments or for those teams that are lacking the sort of system or the structure to begin with. Now, the idea of these videos is to be a good starting point for setting up a team, and then you build from there, you add new elements and get to the kind of the final point that you want to be at with your team. Now, just a quick few disclaimers. I'm not saying that these are the best or the only or the most effective approaches to playing CT Mirage. It's just that in my experience, analyzing and coaching teams for quite a long time now, especially on Mirage, that these sort of setups and approaches are the best places to start. And then from there, it's much easier to add things later on when you have some structure to fall back on. Now, the other aspect is that this video for you guys will come out probably a few days after the very recent Mirage update with a few changes. Now, I have looked over the changes and I'm fairly sure, at least at this kind of beginner's basic level, it's going to make essentially no difference. At higher levels, I think it will make some difference, but for the purposes of this video, I don't expect there to be any developments or any changes that void particularly any of the aspects we're going to be looking at. So that's that out of the way. Let's move on to talking about CT Mirage. Now, during this video, I'm going to refer to 5 positions on the CT side of Mirage. We're going to call these the A anchor, the A rotator, or the connector player is what I'm going to call it for the most part, the AWPer, the B rotator, or for the most part, I'm going to call them the short player, and the B anchor. Now, during this video, we're going to look at 2 kind of overall approaches to playing on the CT side of Mirage, and we're not going to talk really at all about throwing a secondary AWP into the mix, but the setups for the most part would not change drastically if you were to do so. So anyway, let's start this one off, and we're going to talk about our first kind of overall approach and setup. And we're going to call this free mid with retake A. Now, for top teams, at the top professional level, this is the standard opening. And for you guys, even if you've only played in kind of matchmaking or perhaps sort of a pugging environment, you should be quite well acquainted with sort of playing in this sort of manner. So I'll briefly run through each player's role, at least at the start of the round within this sort of setup. So the A anchor will be playing retake, as we said a minute ago. It will normally be jump spotting around the ticket box area, and for the most part they'll just drop their smoke immediately after the ramp molly has burnt out at the start of the round. Now, moving on to the connector player, they'll normally run this way towards connector. They will molly ramp on their way past, and then they'll sit in connector playing off sound and their comms of their teammates. Now, the AWPer at the start of the round will probably peek window right at the start. They have a good spawn, they can just dry peek it like normal, but if they have a worse spawn, it can be a really good idea to ask for a flash from your connector player, or more likely your A anchor, particularly in this setup. Flash over here just to the right of stairs, and any T-AWPers perhaps on a good spawn, or even the Queegs these days that have got out early, they'll be flashed, and then your AWPer can peek much more safely onto the standard sort of mid angle. Now, the short player at the start of the round, as is in the name, will come up through market and up towards short. So they should be communicating quite a lot with the B anchor with what they can hear. And assuming the short player doesn't hear too much, they should just get themselves fast up towards this kind of towards the ladder area and ready to help out their teammates with contesting the terrorist mid control. Now, the B anchor at the start of the round will likely want to throw something I call the Zipnix molly that you can throw from here or here. The molly just bounces off the wall up here and lands in this sort of choke point. Now, this molly is the standard thing to do, even at the professional level. Has a few advantages like preventing rushes. There are some others, but for the moment we'll just gloss over them because it'll be a bit beyond the scope of this video and I wouldn't want to overwhelm any of you. So let's talk about playing against a few sorts of terrorist plays when we're in this sort of setup with free mid and retake A. Now, the first one I'm going to talk about playing against standard A execs. And when I say a standard A exec, all I mean is the standard free smokes you've all seen 100 times of stairs, jungle, and CT spawn. Now, as the smokes come over, the first sort of reaction that should be happening as a team is that your A anchor should get off a counter molly as fast as possible. As soon as he sees the smokes coming over, get off that counter molly onto ramp. And this is a big reason why we had the connector player mollying ramp early. It's almost entirely because the A anchor can get off a really great counter molly onto ramp should the T's execute out. So the A anchor counters mollies ramp. And then in terms for the anchor specifically, depending on this sort of CT smoke, you can sometimes jump on the box and play around it looking for the plant. But for the most part, they just kind of pay passive and sort of commit to that sort of after plant situation. Now, the thing to be scared of in a sort of a execute sort of round like this from the CT's perspective is a terrorist lurker, either out top mid or through underpass. And because of this, it's really important that the mid players, so the shorts, the AWP, and the connector player have really great communication, quickly talking to each other to quickly find out if there could be a player out top mid, who's holding underpass, and all of these sort of things. These will really go a long way on the CT side of Mirage. Now, for the short player specifically, if they want to rotate out here towards connector, they need to be very, very careful about clearing all of these sort of angles. It can be really great if they still have a molly to molly onto underpass and sort of take that area out of the equation. Now, looking towards the connector player, there's a few options for them, but in any situations where the short player and the AWPer can pick up mid and sort of cover the back of the connector player can play on stairs, and there's an angle around the top of the jungle smoke where, assuming it's a normal stairs smoke, where you can see a round trip and all these sort of things, and you'll definitely catch less aware players off guard and you'll find kills quite a lot of the time. So the whole purpose of all of these counter nades and clearing mid and having the connector player perhaps taking fights around the jungle smoke is not necessarily to look for loads of kills. It's more so that you're trying to delay the terrorist side, because if you can get off a really great counter molly, and perhaps if you're the anchor as well, you could nade behind it and all these sort of things, and maybe even throw counter flashes. The whole point is you're buying time for rotations and you're slowing the T's down so much. And if you can slow them down enough that these smokes start to fade before the bomb can get planted on the bomb site, the terrorists will be in a really bad position where there's so many angles to deal with from the AWPer, from the connector player, from the A anchor, and even the short player holding kind of this sort of triple area. It becomes a really, really big challenge to kind of get the bomb down in a kind of advantageous scenario at this point, even in sort of a 5-on-5 if the T's are out in the open. So let's talk about playing against early mid control when in a retake A setup. So once the connector player thinks the terrorists are out mid, and this can be either through sort of sound that you can hear towards top mid or communication from his AWP or his short player, it can be really great for them to drop the connector one-way smoke. Now, if you haven't played around this smoke yourself before, it might take a little bit of getting used to when you can smoke on the left or the right side, and you can use flashes perhaps to take on more aggressive angles towards top mid. So perhaps you want to try out in some pugs or something like this, or perhaps even in a local server first to kind of get used to those sort of angles. But once you get used to it, it can be really powerful and all of these sorts of things. Now, looking towards the AWPer, if window does get smoked off, which is very likely, the AWPer can do a few things, but a really great option can just be rotating straight to top connector and then perhaps refreshing that connector one-way smoke and continuing to play out longer with the connector player towards kind of contesting mid from this sort of area. Now, for the short player, there's a few things they can be doing in this sort of setup when he thinks the T's are out mid. So one thing he could throw is I like to call the Catwalk Smoke, and this smoke lands around here. There are safe lineups, or you can just bounce it off the ledge here. And this smoke allows the short player, if he wanted to safe rotate into ladder without being seen from Delpan or any of these areas. And they can get some kind of weird angles onto underpass and all these sort of things, but kind of in the little bit of the same way as the connector smoke. It's more so really to delay the terrorist side more than anything. And in terms of using this smoke, there's no sort of set rules about when to use it. It's more of kind of feel or feeling out the game for the short player, but kind of a good option can be offsetting it with the connector smoke. So once the connector smoke has faded, perhaps then you can drop your short smoke and just buy more and more time, slow the terrorists down and really kind of disrupt their sort of their calling pattern or whatever during the mid round. Now, this is an aspect that borders on kind of more advanced sort of things, so don't be worried if this goes a bit over your head, but fighting mid on flashbangs can be really, really great for the CT side. And for more experienced players, it will be more obvious when it's a good idea to ask for flashes. Perhaps the AWPer might ask for a flash because he thinks they're in the open. He asks for a flash over here and he'll swing mid and try and kill them in the open. But For newer players to asking for flashes and going for aggressive peaks like this, it might take some experience getting used to. So perhaps in scrims or these sort of things, you go too aggressive with the flashes, and hopefully you can kind of find the nice middle ground where you can get used to taking on aggressive angles. And I feel like you get a lot more use out of your connector one-ways and even your short smokes if you are using flashes semi-aggressively to take on more aggressive angles and try and actually find kills on those tees before they get in a position to split onto a bomb site. Okay, that's enough of a retake A with free mid for the moment. Now we're going to talk about our second overall approach to kind of the CT side of Mirage. Now we're going to call this approach giving mid control with free mid and 2A. So it was at this point in the edit when I realized that I'd completely ballsed up the name of the setup. It should be what it says on screen with giving mid with 3A and 2B. Anyway, back to the video. And again, we're just going to quickly talk over each person's sort of role at kind of the start of the round in this sort of setup. So firstly, with the A anchor will probably molly ramp and then move into playing a forward position on the A bomb site. That could be default, top balcony, firebox. There's a few other places, but these are kind of your go-to sort of spots. And the reason this time that we're having the anchor molly instead of the connector player is that when the anchor's in a kind of close-up position like this, it's very hard for them to get off good counter nades if the T's were to exec out. And it's more important to have the counter nades on the players sitting back and get good nades onto ramp or to palace instead of the A anchor trying to swing out and throw his own sort of counter molly. Now the AWPer will probably play behind the ticket boxes sat back here, not exposed to palace. He'll be sat here taking first ramp contact, and the A anchor will be taking first palace contact in this sort of setup. So during kind of the mid and late round, a really good option for the CT AWPer here, if they have some nades left, is to get a smoke or a molly onto ramp and then peek around ticket, or they could even come in front, but peek towards connector. And it might seem like a bit of a risk because you're leaving yourself so exposed to ramp, but with a smoke down, especially at high level plays, you can risk it. And you can really catch a lot of people off guard peeking this sort of angle during sort of the mid round when you're lacking information. Now the connector player, when we're playing free on A like this and giving mid, has a few options. They could hard commit into playing sandwich, but kind of be warned, this is a position where it's very hard to get off good counter nades from in here, and you can get trapped very, very quickly if you're spotted from ramp or palace. So sandwich is really only used best, in my opinion, when you're sort of being baited in. So the sort of position I would lean towards playing is around this sort of jungle area, and then from here the connector player can balance top con and the window boost as well as potentially ladder if the T's could have crossed. Now this position takes probably more experience than some of the others. You have to be quite comfortable with balancing the angles. You have to have decent game sense of where to look at certain times. But something that can really help here is having great communication with your CT AWPer, saying that, can you check connector for me, saying something like this. Then the AWPer can say, okay, I'm going to smoke ramp, I'm going to peek top ticket, I can't see anything connector. And then the connector player can say, okay, I'm going to commit to holding the window boost for the next 10 seconds or something like this. So moving on to the B bomb site when giving mid, there are a few kind of double site setups you could be playing. The first one we're going to talk about is playing a bait setup. So the B anchor will probably use his smoke at some point, perhaps when he takes contact, and move up to playing this sort of position on the platform. And then with this position, I always think it's best if the short player or another player is taking first contact onto apps. There's a few places they could be doing this from. The short player could be jump spotting himself, and this can be really strong because the T's come out and say, okay, the anchor's jump spotting his fallen bench or something. The short player falls back to empty. The B anchor is not checked when the T's come out and he gets a few kills from behind. But equally, the short player could be taking first contact from out window or perhaps forcing an angle around empty. Any of these things will work fairly well. Now, another age-old setup is forest get right. The B anchor here is in forest and the short player here is in get rights. Now, I've never liked this setup all that much because you're so exposed to flashes, and I feel like if the T's manage to get out of apps, the two players can get sort of isolated very, very quickly. So perhaps in this setup, you want to play the short player anti-flash already, or perhaps they can look short and be kind of naturally anti already to flashes coming over here, which is what would happen if the T's did come out of apps. Now, the final setups we're going to talk about, which are for me the strongest ones, are kind of the Backsight setups. So forest out window, forest empty, bench empty, all of these sort of spots for me are the strongest ones. They're very hard to clear on the from the terrorist perspective. And you can always kind of force the fights how you want them. You can choose when you want to swing out, what exact angle you want to force. And for me, they're definitely the strongest ones to be playing. So let's talk about how you play against some terrorist rounds in these sorts of setups. So in this sort of setup, considering we're already giving mid, we're not going to talk much about if the terrorist went for mid control, because outside of perhaps connector one-waying smoking and these sort of things, you couldn't really do much to contest mid if the T's went for it. Let's talk again about playing against standard A executes. So again, this is just smoke jungle, smoke stairs, and smoke CT. Now, we're first going to talk about the AWP's sort of reaction here, and what you might think from when we talked earlier about playing against this is that the AWP should counter molly ramp immediately, but that would be a mistake in this situation because the AWP here should be gun out, and at high level plays this becomes more and more important because at high level plays the likelihood that the AWP is going to get a chance to take a shot on a player coming out ramp before the smoke is bloomed is pretty high actually. So the AWP here should really just stay gun out, take a shot if he sees someone, then falls, and then think about using his molly or perhaps even saving it for the after plant. And then perhaps he could again try and play around the ramp, the CT smoke. Now, it helps a lot in this sort of setup if the AWP can be working fairly hard to take first ramp contact. So perhaps if the T's did come out slowly, then jumping on the box is a good idea. Because the moment the A anchor has to divert his attention from just Palace and worry about ramp as well, and when he has to start kind of taking risks about where he's looking, is where the likelihood that he just gets straight entry goes up so much. Now the connector player here should really be working hard to get nades onto Palace. If he has a molly, a counter molly onto Palace is really strong in this sort of situation. And from here, the important thing is to use flashbangs. Now if you can get flashbangs in front of default from either the connector or the AWP, but probably the connector player, if they can get good flashbangs in front of default or behind default with nades onto Palace, then the anchor can swing and go for kills towards Tetris or ramp or sandwich. And this is where default becomes really powerful, because if you can get 1 or 2 kills as the anchor and then stay alive, it just buys so much time, especially if there are mollies or smokes onto Palace, and then the T's have to waste ages coming around the front of the site to kill you. Now, the connect player from here could stay around here holding mid. He could potentially come through the jungle smoke and play with his anchor towards the bomb site. But kind of, again, as we said earlier, it's not necessarily that you're going for kills. It's more so you're going for kills in this setup than a retake setup. But what you're really trying to do more than anything is just delay the T side as much as possible. Try and set up some sort of crossfires potentially from here, or use good flashes with your anchor just to go for a few kills, then stay alive, buy times for rotates, and hopefully again we can get these smokes fading before that bomb gets planted. And in this situation, if the anchor's still alive, it's a round 1, but even in a 4-on-4, if he gets traded out, if the bomb hasn't been planted, this is still a pretty good situation for the CT side. So moving on, let's tie everything we've done today together. So I think a lot of newer players or people newer to playing Team Counter-Strike, I think they very easily get stuck on this idea that you play one spot or one setup for an entire CT round. Now in reality, at the top level of professional play, there is constant movement between spots and setup as people use utility to lean on different areas of the map. Perhaps they take map control and then use that information to make read and stack certain areas. So this might sound a little bit overwhelming to some people, but we're going to tie everything we've done already together and talk through a very simple example of moving between setups. So for our example, we're going to assume we're starting the round, as we talked about earlier, in a retake A with 3 mid setup, just like this. So for our example, we're going to assume that the terror side takes some mid control, so perhaps they smoke top mid, molly connection, and come out on some flashes. So as we said earlier, from here the connect player will be playing off sound, and the comms are definitely the AWP here will probably counter smoke con, and then perhaps again the short player could smoke cat or re-smoke connector or something like this. Now from here, what's very likely to happen is that the T's at some point will probably smoke window, and from here the AWP will have to make a decision about where he's going to play. So he could rotate towards jungle like this and hold Palace. He could, again, as we said earlier, go to top connector and play longer with his connector player. But the example we're going to talk about is if the CT or if the AWPer rotates through CT spawn towards the ticket area. So guys, this is the point you need to be paying attention, because this is where the magic happens. So it seems a bit pointless to have the AWPer and the A anchor playing from the ticket area. So what we're going to have happen here is we're going to have the anchor push onto the bomb site and play around default or with firebox or perhaps under bulk. It doesn't really matter. And then the AWPer can sit behind the ticket boxes here, not exposed to Palace, holding ramp as we said earlier. Now once the connector one-way smokes have ran out, connector player will probably want to fall in towards jungle. And equally on the B bomb site, when they're running out of mid nades, the short player will probably want to fall into playing a double site setup with the B anchor. So what we've done here is we started off the round leaning towards mid with 3 players and playing retake A. We're risking A a little bit. Once we've burnt our mid nades, we've rotated into playing just on the bomb sites, a double site B setup and the 3 on A as we spoke about earlier. Now for some of you, that was probably incredibly exhilarating and you're probably tripping out right now. So I wouldn't be surprised if you need a few minutes to calm down after seeing something quite as exciting as that. So, as I said earlier, this is just a very basic rundown of how I'd first approach setting up a team on the CT side of Mirage. And to kind of prevent this video being hours and hours and hours long, I've skipped over a lot of the specifics about the nade lineups or the exact angles you might want to hold. So some of these might be linked in the description, but if they aren't, feel free to message me on Twitter with your questions or your feedback or whatever. Tweet me on Twitter, but probably the best place to go would probably be my Discord server. And in there, there'll be a lot of people like myself, probably people that I've coached before, that could probably help you with almost any question you're going to have. So if I said, you should play this position with these nades, I haven't exactly gone through all of it and you're a bit confused, just go in there, ask the question, and somebody will very likely be able to point you in the right direction. So I hope you guys enjoyed that one. And if you did, give it a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, check out my social media places as linked below. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.